Well, hello, everybody. Um, Boy, this brings me back to the brief time I taught online. I don't know if anyone else has the same experience. Uh, Newsflash, we're all about to do that now forever, right? It seems. Um, yeah, I'm a Latin teacher. I am trying to right now split my time between the chat and the Q&A tab, but please leave a question in the Q&A and I'll see that a little bit easier. And I'll get to it while we're going on. So if I'm talking about something, please just this is like you're raising your hand and we're in person. Just have a question in the Q&A. I'll see if I can get to it if it's not something I'm going to say in a bit. Otherwise, question right off the bat, will I be gearing this to online? That wasn't the intention. But look where we are, right? To be quite honest, that's a good question. Can you all see the Q&A? Yes, you can. Seems like Linda can't hear me, but I'm not getting, oh wow. Lots of people answering in the Q&A open. All right. So if you can hear me, you're all set. Looks like, Linda, you'll have to have some technical issues on your end. I'm just going to get going. Yeah. So, well, thanks, Voces. I would have said Voces or Woces, being a Latin teacher. But thank you for having me present this. So yeah, let's get back to this. We don't know what our online teaching responsibilities are going to be. So I'm just going to say that I think a lot of us just did a patch job. Some of us still have things in our classrooms that we didn't have time to go get. So we had to patch either the coming weeks or what I think it's not so unrealistic to assume is the rest of the year. Look at Kansas. And we might very well, and not, let's just prepare mentally, prepare to continue distance learning for as long as it takes. That might go into next year. We just need to be prepared that'll happen. Now, I think we'll at least be prepared. We'll have some warning about that. So everything I'm talking about now, provided that we have classes and some synchronous time, maybe our classes will be on Zoom for all I know, right? First, we got to get all the kids laptops, chargers, and home internet. But maybe we will have more synchronous class time. And everything I'm talking about right now will apply to that. Or if you prefer to think of it a different way, when we go back to the old normal, not the new normal, but if we so luckily have the chance to go back to the old normal sooner than we think, then this is totally applicable. All right, I wasted 5 minutes on all that, but no problem. I'm here to talk to you about talk and read. I like distilling things to very simple ideas, because most things are too complex, that I've observed, the ways I've tried to teach and plan and grade and all that. So this is one of the latest things I was able to express: talk and read. I'm going to talk about how to not burn out, which is something we can all maybe appreciate right now, feeling a little bit of stress. Put yourself into this classroom mindset. First, why the reduced format of talk and read only? I mean, look, you got to take attendance. You got to do this. I know there's more to teaching, but why did I want to present this? I'm going to show you the first slide I opened the year with. I'm a husband. We have things to do, right? We have a life outside of the classroom, and a reduced format helps me retain that life. Yes, by the way, I do start the year, I tell the student, we have one of those, it's like 10 to 15 minute meet and greet. Most teachers just give a syllabus or something. They try to do an icebreaker. Yeah. I get right into it. And I let them know who I am and some other things. We end with a personalized draw and then talk if there's time, which there never is, but I get a whole bunch of cards from students to type up and talk about in the first real class. And the prompt is, draw 4 things you like or like to do. And I show them mine. I like food, coffee, designing marching band shows. That's true. People do that. And playing drums, and new this year is archery. So again, these are all things that happen outside of school. So the talk and read no-burnout lesson plan has allowed me and other people who are doing similar things to what they love or like to do. Hopefully not drinking too much coffee, but is there really such a thing? I don't know. So that's what I want to present you with in the impetus, why I think teachers are doing too much. And here's a possible solution for you. Yeah, the message is don't do what you don't have to. And it turns out there are a lot of things many teachers have thought they need to do, but I haven't really taken a look at that. I'm just going to go through my list. Yeah, look, preparing a new activity for every single class, you don't have to do that. Maybe you have a handful and they rotate. That's not a new activity, right? You don't have to do that. Maybe you want to, or maybe you're bored and you need something new. But you don't need a new one for every class. You also, look, don't choose something that's going to take a long time to prep. And then, what do you get, 1 class out of it? Or maybe 2, right? That's unnecessary work. Another one is creating quizzes and grading anything. Sorry, no time for that. That's a whole other series of workshops and presentations and concepts and things that make your head explode. Displode it is the Latin. It's a better word. Things go in every direction. Displode it. Anyway, I can't get into the creating quizzes or grading anything. I will just say teachers spend too much time doing that, right? Go. TLDR, have all of your quizzes and tests, do only half of it, and then grade and correct in class. You're welcome. Okay, moving on. Here's another one. Avoiding ineffective or inefficient practices. Sometimes they're both. Here's my list. Reverting. I say reverting because it seems like everybody was taught the way they learned, and typically it's been very heavy grammar rule-based instruction for a few hundred years. So, but not beyond that. Reverting. So you want to try something more comprehension-based, more communicative, and then you're like, I don't know what to do. You go back. So one of my avoids is going back to what used to be so familiar and comfortable. Also, paired speaking activities in the sense of present this rule. We're going to practice that rule and then produce that rule. That's something I would recommend avoiding, because what you're getting students to produce isn't something they can produce. Sure, they can produce after like 10 minutes. Great. Try that again in a couple months. Probably won't happen with the accuracy of the grammar rule you're trying to teach. Also, signing. This is something I like to avoid. I like to avoid, I recommend people avoid, which is assigning these culture projects like a week-long culture investigation unit. Especially, and I say especially because there tends to be a lot of resources in English that students research to complete this project about a culture. A whole week of school, even a few days at home, that saps a lot of time from what we know students need: input and interaction. So, talk and read. Once those things are out of the way, classes, well, what is class if you're not teaching rules, if there's not a lecture? This is a very question that a lot of people start at, and some never get beyond. Like, what do you teach if you're not teaching rules? If you're not teaching facts about a culture in English, like, what do you do? So talk and read is that solution. The way to reduce it is you talk about something. Please don't think I'm being pedantic. You talk about something and you read something. That's it. If you have to submit like a lesson plan, the daily lesson plan can include the activities like for what is talked and read about, as well as the purpose. My principal is great. She has reduced our lesson planning to what is your purpose and product, meaning your learning objective is a common way. What is your objective? And then what is the evidence or assessment? But purpose and product is really communicative language teaching friendly, isn't it? Because what are our purpose? Communicative purposes. So that's it. You talk about something, you read about something, and there's a purpose for doing that, a communicative purpose for doing that. Now, from the student perspective, this would be listen and read. Right? The talk portion is very much led by the teacher, especially in the beginning years. It is easier to think of this in terms of what you do. You talk and read as a class. But this is what the student perspective is. Maybe you're facilitating something with a lot of rejoinders, the interjections and phrases. Students are yelling those out. You're in the beginning levels, you're really facilitating a conversation. You're not speaking at students like the old or lecture style, but there's just only so much the beginning level students can say. So I also want to say, don't get fooled by anyone thinking this is the kind of teacher-centered lesson. That's totally frowned upon now. You got to realize the content is student-centered, and it's just that students can't express themselves fully in the target language yet. They don't have to, actually, at this point, and it's expected. They need input until output happens. I'm just going to say case closed on that. The read portion could be any reading activity, either independent, led by you, in pairs, groups, or you know what? All of the above in one class. Displode it again, right? No, you can totally do it. So specifically, we have talk. Obviously, this is going to depend on you, your comfort level speaking the target language. I used to think this was a uniquely Latin teacher problem, but it isn't. There are very many, I'm hearing more and more about teachers who maybe at some point were ashamed about the way they speak, or something dumb about the accent, or is not, a lot of teachers are just not comfortable yet just speaking their target language. We got to work on that. And I think the first step is not holding ourselves to such a high level of accuracy. If you are barely in the advanced level according to an OPI, well, that means you're barely starting to use accurate language, because that's the level that happens. So maybe you're not talking much. Maybe you want to start the class with 5 minutes of a talk activity and then get right into the reading, right? I know a lot of teachers, it's the reading is the anchor, and I agree with that. I do think reading is super important because it's input for all students of all languages, and students can self-pace their input when they're reading on their own. That's big. I say 5 to 20 minutes. It doesn't even matter how long your classes are either. After 15 to 20 minutes, there is a good chance your students need or would benefit from a brain break by that time. So maybe you have an hour and a half long class. I'm sorry. I have no idea how I would teach for 90 minutes, and I hope I never have to. But you probably already know by now, you don't get a lot of time with each activity, and you need to make sure there's transitions and breaks between those. You have to break up the 90 minutes with many breaks where students can reset, just drop the cognitive load, and then start getting that input again. As for the talk itself, that could be as simple as a day, date, weather routine. Maybe a quick question or a check-in, right? Like, how are you? How are you doing today? Right? That's one of the first things I ask students when I scan the room. It's just like, oh, I think this was a biology test today. Right? That's, you can tell. So why don't you use that as the content? There's no reason not to. And maybe that's as much as you're comfortable right now with the talking portion before you get into a text. It's just like, how are we doing? Good? Right? Anybody happy? Who's sad? That's too bad. Is it a secret or you want to talk about it? That kind of a thing. Check in. I think at one point I had very strict isn't the right word. I had very structured routines. And at this point, I kind of all blend so that the opening of class for me, this first talk part, can just sometimes be warming up students to the idea that they're about to hear Latin for like 40 minutes. Right? I actually think that's the Goldilocks class time, at least for a beginning language class, 9th grade, first year language class in 9th grade, 45 minutes, it's real good. I was afraid it was going to be too little because we did hour-long classes, but I like 45 minutes. It's about enough. Even with the breaks, it's about enough attention. And for me, I have a pretty talk read. I don't have to do 3 talks and then a read, like with breaks in between. So that's helpful for me. So here, I want to show you a list of my favorite talks from this current year, that all the way back to September. Okay. The date or weather talk. I mean, it's so basic, but this is one way students learn. They pick up the numbers 1 through 30 and 31 just from the date. It's pretty, because you don't even have to only do today's date, especially if you have a rotating schedule and a class doesn't meet every day of the week. Right? I have the timeline on my board of today the word for tomorrow, 2 days from now, and then yesterday and day before yesterday. And so sometimes I'll just be like, oh, yeah, what happened? Was that yesterday on the 18th or 2 days ago on the 17th? I don't remember. Sometimes I remember everything. I have a memory of an elephant, but I don't know that. So yeah, I like forget to put the day, I forget to put the actual day of the week card on the board. You know, it's like, oh, Mr. P, it's not Tuesday. Oh, right. That's the kind of level of theatrics I'm comfortable with. But it's a sneaky way to get more interaction on what is a totally boring topic, the date, and maybe the weather. New England, we have a little bit more weather change, abrupt weather change, sometimes throughout the same day. So that might be a little more relevant to us. Either way, it's a great routine to start the class. Here's the day, the date. We either talk about it or write it down as we're talking about it. That's one thing I wanted to make clear about the talk and read portion. It's not as if there's never any jotting down or writing down during the talk. I actually have these management sheets. I believe it started with John Cowart and John Piazza. At least they shared that with me. So it's like students get in, start class, they come in, and there's 3 to 5 minute do now, bell ringer. I actually just use that content for the rest of the class, but there's a place for the day and date. Some students fill it out already knowing everything, and others I'm just like, oh, today, what is today? Yeah, Scribe, write that down. Just a little bit more of a small, tiny task keeps students on focus. I just want to go over to this question Q&A. There's a question: how do I set up the expectations or framework for the talking activity? Oh, that's a good question. Well, if I'm just like, how are you today? Who's happy? I mean, they answer. That's the kind of activity and I like the kind of activities that aren't so structured that you need to teach the activity and give instructions on how to complete the activity. This talk portion is more for me like, what can we start doing right away so they hear input that they then read later on, maybe almost immediately, talk about something and write that down, copy it down. So I haven't come across any issues with expectations of what students do when we have a talk activity. Now, maybe I should continue with my list and that'll become apparent. Class sizes, luckily I have no, I don't want to say luckily. I have a very small class and a very large class. In my experience, it doesn't matter how many overall students you have. Your largest class, year to year, always feels like the largest class, and the smallest class feels like the smallest. So maybe one year you're teaching section of 20 and they're all 20, and then you have one of 27. That's going to feel like the big class, and maybe it's got you moving management wise a little more. Another year, whoa, you got classes of 15 and there's a big class of 19. 19 actually will feel bigger, and you're like, man, that class. It's a phenomenon I've observed. I can't explain it, but I have a class of 15, 19, 22, and 7. I feel like there should be a minimum class size. That's got quiet kids in that. That one's a weird class. But yeah, I wish everything were a little evened out, but You know, I've taught classes. I want to knock. Luckily, I haven't taught a class above 30. I know people who are doing fine, pushing 40 students in class. It is about the expectations. You're right. What do you do to establish that? I think it's all within the first few weeks of school, and every quarter going over the new expectations for the new quarter, or the new expectations for the new quarter. Yeah, smoke and mirrors. That's most of teaching, isn't it? So let's go back to my list here about the talk. Another one, personalized questions and answers, is a term I got from the teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling TPRS world years ago. That's more of like how all of my classes kind of start now. I'm just seeing how they're doing. If anyone saw that like event that just happened, or this and that, movies, things, especially if it's after a weekend, which weekend talk, it's one of the easiest ways to start a week in the world. You don't have to plan anything. Every weekend, you're just like, what happened? Not only that, there's no need to ever delay the past tense. Even if you have 7 past tenses in your language, you can just use them. What happened Sunday? Who stayed in? Right? It's so relevant to students' lives, and you can get some mileage out of that. Maybe you only get 5 minutes out of that. Okay, so the talk portion of your class is 5 minutes, and now let's read. Picture talk is one of my favorites. You have a picture and you talk about it. You ask questions, and I mean, a lot of these things blur together. You ask personalized questions to students based on a picture. How you get the picture, there could be so many ways. Sometimes I just put up the latest meme that made me laugh. Other times, at the beginning of class, a prompt for that do now bell ringer thing can be draw blank, right? Draw whatever. I'll take the drawings and put them under the document camera online. I believe you can maybe put up to the screen, take a screenshot, whatever platform you're using, and you just talk about the picture and ask questions. It's usually pretty compelling. The worst drawings are often the best. Stick figure, it's so great. And also when we're learning about the target culture, because I no longer try to like sneak target culture into the day. I just blatantly tell students, today we're learning about the Romans. And we do it. The key is to make the content relevant by asking those questions like, oh, do you have something like this at home? Oh, no. So picture talk is great for using cultural artifacts, products, and practices of the target culture, right? Or it's pop. So movie talk, I still use this term because I have no expectation of students acquiring specific vocabulary. If you do, don't call it that. Call it like clip chat or something, or video talk. And these are all shorthand ways to refer to using a video using a video as a source of content. If you pause a video, it becomes a picture talk. So these are the same skills. Just talk about what you see, what's going on, or you talk about what just happened. Another way that people unsure of how to introduce the past tense, you saw something, it's over. Talk about what happened. Who just saw? Right. I like movie talk because the story is already there. and students can make predictions, and there's something to look at. This is great if you have issues with imagination and creativity. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this year I did have some issues with, or in the past couple of years, I don't understand. No, I'm sorry. I do not understand by now. There's kind of like a too cool for school, and I have students coming from different middle schools. No one knows each other yet very well, so no one wants to take that risk of being too silly. And so creating stories together has taken me almost the whole year, up until maybe a month ago, for them to take those creative risks to oh, I know what could happen in this story. But movie talk is a little, did I say, safer, because there's more of it to grasp visually, and the story's there. You just narrate it or ask questions of that. I want to just go to a question: to what extent do I expect students to answer in the target language? I don't. I know this is controversial for some people. They're like, every minute counts, every minute counts. I don't have that problem. I usually expect one word or one phrase responses. I give some cues, like, oh, and then I went to the, this is a like close, empty space. Usually one word goes in there. I ask a lot of either or questions. Some students are just rifling off their answers, and they're more or less complete. Wait, I want to go back to that. Why don't I expect? Oh yeah, I used to have the no English rule in the Latin classroom, and then I just didn't really need that. When I felt I made a rule that was, you look, you listen, and you ask when language is unclear. If you're listening, you're not talking. So like, English in class didn't really happen. If a student answers one of my questions in English, that is evidence that they comprehended the question. And as far as I'm concerned, that's number one, and that's victory. I teach the first year, but there's no reason to assume that you won't have fourth year students who are just slower at processing language. No need to deny that experience for them if they want to take the target language for a third or fourth year, but they're just a little behind their peers. They might not be speaking it. But when things get out of control, because I know you're thinking like, nah, there's no way there's enough Latin if students can respond in English. I do have a set of guidelines, a poster that's a language guideline that says 1 to 2. Oh no, it says Latin words you know, Latin words you see in the room, proper nouns, names, places, and then 1 to 2 English words if you really need it. Because sometimes, man, there's some really good answers. I might not even know how to say some of that in the target language yet, but they're like crucial nouns or something that would be hilarious to keep. So if I feel like there's a little, the responses are long and they're in English, right? Because 1 or 2 words, that's fine. If they're starting like, I'll just go walk over and point to that guideline, be like, we got to reel it in a little bit, which really means they listen more because they can't speak yet in the first year. They can't say much yet as a whole class. All right, I last talked about movie talk. Special person. I learned this when it was Star of the Week, and La Persona Especial in Latin, it's Discipulus Illustris, the illustrious student shining, right? It's a student spotlight interview program. Just search online if you're familiar with that. And it's a program that the teacher asks questions, students answer them, and they're all on the board for the support. You can have sentence starters. I have some students who answer in English again. I have others who will say the starter I have for them, like, oh, what terrifies you the most? And they're like, oh, may terret. Like, they'll start it and then say the word or the situation. This is a great activity. This year, I've been able to keep it up every Tuesday and Thursday for the entire year. It's all volunteer based. Student wants to be interviewed by me. And I've kept that going because halfway through the year, I had students write their own questions that were going to be asked. And, I just spent some time typing that up, finding, in some cases, how to express their question. And so then they had more ownership. It was new questions. So not only did they not really know what was coming up yet, but there were like 30 or 40 new questions. It was a lot. And then I kept it going even more because, even the most exciting things get boring. By doing guess the student or teacher. I have a post on this at magisterp.com about how I set that up. It was very simple. At first I had teachers choose questions and then answer them. And I had a guess the teacher day. So students just, it's kind of like a countdown of Kahoot. If you've played that, where you get more points for answering first, soonest. So students would be in groups, and like I'd show one question and a response from a teacher, and they had to guess which teacher it was. And if they did on the first one and there were 10 questions, they'd get 10 points. But it's like, ooh, we don't know who drinks Sprite actually. So let's go to the next question. It's like, how old are you? And they're like, yeah, that's the best question in the world because it gives it away. And they think it gives it away. If they answered correctly on that one, that'd be 9 points. Points are added up at the end. Anyway, it was great. And then I extended that to students. So on Thursdays, we were doing Guess the Student. We had 3 students, so 3 rounds of guessing who this student and their responses were. It was awesome. So special person was my Tuesday, Thursday. And I mean my Tuesday, Thursday talk routine. I didn't have to plan my Tuesdays and Thursdays ever. Didn't have to plan Monday because we did weekend talk. Monday, Tuesday. So I just had Wednesday and Friday. Friday was a team game. I never had to plan what I was going to do there. Just rotated a team game. So it was really like Wednesdays. What did I want to do Wednesday? Maybe we were in more of a picture talk movement. Maybe we were more of the movie talk. Just alternate those things. Next is the fa-ba-la-la-la-la. It's not a real word. Who cares? It's a super short story because laugh at the sound. And those took about 5 minutes to create. It was just the simplest. That's where I started getting into this story asking, co-creating a story with the class. Is like, student would be sad, coming in, I'm like, why are they sad? Guess what it is. Basically, we did it within a few minutes, and that was it. They didn't even have to resolve. It was just something to start class with speaking. My guidelines poster, again, to answer that question, was the Latin Latin you see in the room, proper nouns, names and stuff, and then 1 to 2 English words. That kept target language high in class without me worrying about much of anything. The question, who is what the special person? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I see how someone responded to that. Yeah, student volunteers to be interviewed in the target language. I have the student management sheets on my website at magisterp.com if you want to check that out. And I don't know what the name of the tool, I don't know what tool I mentioned. Maybe if someone can help out, I'll come back to that in a minute. So without further ado, we're going on to the read. I had a lot of free reading this year, and I started by having students read second week 1 minute on their own. Anytime we did an activity, read for at least 1 minute, which at this point in the year is more like 3 to 5 minutes on your own before we do the other thing. That means I didn't have to teach or instruct how to just sit and read for 10 minutes during the free choice reading time. At this point, it was every Wednesday and Friday. Read whatever Wednesday, 10 minutes, first 10 minutes of class. Free reading Friday, first 10 minutes of class. And I started with the expectation of just read this on your own. Now let's do something as a whole class. And now do something in pairs. And then longer choice reading were on specific days. So I found that reading is a clear task. It shouldn't be understated. So it's usually instruction free and focused. Hey, read for 1 minute. You don't have to explain what that means, okay? It's hard to speak when you're reading. Also, when students read, I read. Not necessarily what they're reading. I mean, by the fourth class of the day, I'm not going to read that same text again. With that, I might look at it the first time, but not subsequent times. But for anything that involves students copying into their notebooks from the talks, from the talk section of class, this is known as like write and discuss or type and talk. This is also the opportunity to read what is being written or projected on the board. So that can still be part of your read section. If you want to do something together as a class and then you write, if you do something together class and then students are copying that into their notebooks as you're writing it up, that can happen in this second half because you can pause, point to what's there, and then read. 1 second. There's a lot of sound coming from this room. Thank you. Maybe you didn't hear that. It's all right. So this is also an opportunity. I also want to talk about my favorite reads. So there's the talk portion. I just went over that list. Here are my read portions. How do you keep students accountable for actually reading? We don't have electrodes on their head. For all I know, kids are staring at the book and not reading, but that's no different than it has ever been. If we follow it up and with a pair or a whole class, I'm asking questions and someone's just like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, well, you didn't read. It's usually very clear when a student hasn't read, and even if they somehow really tricked us by like, they're just like looking at them. But I subscribe to the idea of not committing read aside, which is assigning tasks in addition to reading. That really kills the joy of reading. And whenever I can eliminate that, I do. Because, well, the less I do that, the more I find students willing to just read. Especially if they know, if they're reading on their own for a few minutes and then we're doing a whole class and then maybe break them up into pairs to read on their own. Monitoring the room, basic management stuff. Just to be clear about my idea of reading, I'm suggesting that anytime you have any reading that you plan to do together or in groups, first have each student read that text independently. Then as a whole class, maybe process that input by asking questions and whatnot, or having students go right into pairs. This will explain more of that. My read activities. Free voluntary reading, students choose what they want and read for however long. I really make it free by not attaching any kind of journaling, logs, nothing. It's you read for that time, I read for that time too. Occasionally I have to walk around. Some students get sleepy. You know what? They probably need the rest. Very rarely do students start just using that as chat time. And I think that's because since the beginning of the year, I built that expectation of when it's time to read, we read. I also call, I call this read and discuss or slash sustained silent reading. And that is, SSR for me is when everyone is reading the same text. FVR is when they get to choose. So we have a lot of co-created texts and class texts that I print out in maybe half sheets sometimes too at the beginning of the year that they put in their folder. Students can, at times, read anything from that folder, even in class. Maybe we read for 5 minutes, we have a brain break, and then we read for 5 minutes. That was a common routine I had. Okay, pick something in your folder and read. But if I handed out a text and everyone's reading the same thing, I call that SSR, especially when there's some kind of discussion in a whole class afterwards. Like, oh, okay, can anyone describe what this is? Oh, okay, want to go over here, question. Are all my text paper or do I do anything online? Oh, yeah, actually this year, I didn't even start a Google Classroom. Every teacher in my school had their assignments posted. They were using Google Classroom. Kids were getting notifications 5 times a day. I prefer low tech and no tech whenever possible. I just think there's too much that can happen with laptops or devices in class. So I kept everything either printed or copy into notebook. I mean, I've never seen a student work through their entire class notebook in a school year. They seem to, like, maybe get halfway through all the pages and then just toss it or donate it. But that was one way I saved printing, not costs, but printing on our end, which was, hey, here's our story, or here's the text. I'm projecting it, and then students take the time to copy, but also I use that time to process that text too. So that was one way to keep down paper trail. Let me go back to this. Read and translate, super simple. Look, I don't think translation is a problem when students are translating what they already understand. When students translate in order to understand, that's when it's I think a pretty bad practice, actually. So we want to give comprehensible input, not input students have to work in order to make comprehensible, like step zero in order to do something with that. So read and translate is more, man, translating is slow when you understand everything. So that can take up some time. If you have something, well, we have some time left, let's do that. Otherwise, I take those, put them in the grade book. It shows students are doing stuff in my classroom. And then that was also good for Fridays before we did the team game. Just here's a text, read and translate in groups, so it prepares you for the game, and then move on. Read and draw, hey, so much you can do with that. You can then take the drawings the next day and use that as your talk, your picture talk activity for your talk and read plan. Also, the next one, main docs, which means liar. I've also heard this called like stultus stupid, but I wanted to translate out loud into English, and I wanted to translate badly sometimes, and students yell out that I'm a liar because I'm lying to them. Hey, if I lie about what this says, you got to call me out. That's a really easy way to process input with students. No printing at all. The reading can be projected. They don't need a copy of everything all the time. A KFD quiz, that's something you should probably search on my website, magisterp.org. calm. It is my take on the know, want to know, and learn, KWL. It's really, what do you know, what do you forget, and what don't you know? So we can do this. Students have a text. They sort words into columns. It's okay if they don't finish. It's just something that is timed. And then I'll go over that. And if I start by reading the text out loud, and if student hears a word in their forget or don't know column, they raise their hand, and then I tell them what that means. And then it's they write down the English meaning. It's an opportunity to process some more of that input. And they're like, oh, I don't expect students to acquire those words that they suddenly were told the meaning of, but it is a way to process. And also their no column is super long, so it's helpful. It's really confident boosting. Last, certainly not least, is just a simple back and forth. I think I've seen this also called ping-pong reading. Students are in pairs, and one student reads silently, let's say sentence by sentence, one sentence silently. Their partner translates aloud into English. So if you're speaking, you're actually speaking in English. So what that does is, it's really the partner who's not speaking that's doing the reading silently. And they're having the meaning either established or processed for them out loud by their partner. And of course, inevitably, they're going to help each other, because the one speaking won't know, and the one reading is like, oh, it has to be this. So that's a good activity, and pretty simple. I actually didn't have an ending slide. Great. So I'm going to go back to the beginning one, and we have about 7 minutes of Q&A in real time. I was trying to go back and forth. I guess we could start that off with that last one. What's your preferred method for getting student drawings onto the projector? I have a document camera. I will admit I didn't always have one. I mean, no, I will admit that I'm lucky enough to have one now, but I didn't always have one. So I do things of like taking a photo of the picture with my phone, emailing it to my school email. It was a little bit cumbersome, but document camera is the way to go. Because that means anytime there is some kind of compelling diversion that you didn't plan for, instantly. I think one time I had a student, last year I had a student from maybe Trinidad, and there was money came up, and so he took out currency from his native country of birth. I don't know where that was. I'm forgetting. But it was very cool. I just put it under the document camera, and we talked about what was on the money, what was like the actual bill, how it was similar and different. Main docs, well, yeah, it's very simple. I project a text, and if I have a lot of time, I'll lie a lot. I'll be translating out loud and just say so many things that aren't on there, and students, they're like, no, that's not what that says. Main docs, you're a liar. If I'm running out of time, I'll just translate the whole thing out loud, and students are like following along, waiting for me to make a mistake, and like I might make a couple, just so they don't think the whole game is fake, because it's not fake. It's just, you can gauge that with time. I don't have a recommended document camera. I've taught in several different schools, and they're all different. Maybe Elmo is the name coming to mind, but reading correspond to talk topics, or do I plan the lessons readings ahead of time? Oh, that's an excellent question. Sometimes you can have a talk generate content for the read portion in the same day, right? Other times, the talk, whatever is generated in the talk, I might need a day to edit if it's something students don't know yet, or can express yet. I probably need a day to edit that, turn it into a text, and then either print if it's substantial or just project if it's like a paragraph. And then we can read that during class the next day. So I'd say it depends on that text. I'm sorry, it depends on the activity. I've done both. I like planning in ways that it's all set up, generate content this way, you have the next class planned. But also I know we're going to read a text about Aquarius when the zodiac changed. So we're gonna read that. Like I have it all printed and ready to go. If we're doing a movie talk, I have those ready. So the week before, I'll just print that stuff out or get it projected. Sounds like you do no traditional instruction. How do you assess that they're learning what is required by curriculum? Our curriculum has 2 broad units, which is guided by the essential questions, who am I and who are we? And then who were the Romans? So during who am I or who are we, it's all gathering target language, getting to know each other a little bit more. Who are we as a class? The familiar, before learning about the distant past of thousands of years ago. So I prefer to think of assessment in terms of I say something or we read something and a student looks like this. That is an assessment. I need to make that language more comprehensible to them. Other than that, quizzes and tests, I do very little. Quizzes and tests don't cause acquisition or learning. We don't have to do that. They're really just there to give grades, but grades don't cause acquisition or learning either. Again, these are big topics for different stuff, but I do as little of all of that as possible, and students acquire just fine. Yeah, so more another question on assessment. I just touched upon that, but for example, can I do this real quickly? I found that most people just want an answer to the question, how am I doing? Or how is my kid doing? Or how is the student doing? And scores are generally fine. I'd say almost always fine. I can't think of a moment when they weren't fine. So student does a KFD quiz in class. It's not a quiz. They can't do poorly on it. They're just receiving input and I'm helping establish meaning. Check off 4 out of 4. They have a 4. All my scores out of 4. And then they get 1 course grade based on a simple rubric. But you check the grade book and there's a bunch of scores in there. And as long as students are meeting my expectations set forth in the curriculum, I'm sorry, in the criteria I set for the rubric, then they get the A, because why wouldn't you get an A? Why shouldn't we expect every student to do well? Some still don't. Some still do things and make choices and don't meet expectations, but I make them super simple. Yeah, so there's so many questions about grading and assessment. It's so big, and it's probably my favorite grading, my favorite topic that I write about, blog about. magisterp.com, the very first post will send you to those ideas. It's a sticky post. It's never going away. Look at that. I think standardized tests? No. Latin? Wait. No. We don't have standardized tests, last I knew, for language. And if you're having to talk about, at least statewide, talking about the AP and the IB and the stamp and the apple or that. Yeah. Those are tests, so you can teach to those tests, but acquiring language can happen independently from that. Can I do a webinar and assessment sometime? Ooh. I've done those. I don't know how long that would have to be, or how I can really, I don't know, explain that well. I must have written 100 blog posts on grading and assessment, and they'd all kind of have the same message. So maybe I could do one in a simple time. We'll think about it. I guess I'll think about that and see if I can trim something down. It's a good question. It's obviously on everybody's mind. Everyone has to grade, but no one needs to be given a grade to acquire a language. Where are remote students accessing my texts? Remote, meaning right now? Oh, I'm in Massachusetts. The state commissioner has said there's no expectations for teachers to create content, nor that students do any learning at this time. This is a particular, well, this is a pretty crazy time right now, I would have to say. So, no, I told them to read. I told them to, I originally wanted to give them some novellas, and we had them ready, but school closed before we could hand them out. No one's back allowed at the school. So they have their Latin folders. They can just find a quiet time if they want to keep up with their Latin. Find a quiet time in the day and just read starting back to September. Feel real good about yourself reading those September texts, right? And then work your way up to last week's text. Oh, good question. What am I listening for when students are doing paired reading? And do I provide any feedback when they are doing that? Well, first of all, I'm listening to make sure the students far away from me are actually reading, because I'm not near them. You know, that's just teacher management. You monitor, and the second you turn, they don't. No. So I'm actually monitoring the room. So they know I'm seeing them, hearing them. I want to know if there's a lot of incomprehension. Sometimes there are some pairs, some groups that ask me a lot of questions. So I'm like, yeah. So they need a lot of help here. Others are they're reading back and forth, translating, and they got it just fine. So it's more about giving the support. Feedback, if I hear mistranslations, I'd say, or I don't give corrective feedback, but I might then ask a question during a whole class portion that addresses something I heard. Like, I heard a lot of people not finding this part clear. I won't say a lot of people didn't know what the hell was going on, right? Like I'll use student-friendly terms. Yeah. So, hey, it's 7:07. We have, we're out of time. So, there were a lot of people signed in here, and I don't know, probably more in the Facebook live feed. Again, this is recorded, and thank you. Okay, so in the chat, you can see this closing. Yeah, thank you, Erin. And everyone can get their participation certificate by submitting that form. There's a video, look at that. Also on the YouTube channel. Hey, I'm famous. Thanks everybody. I will be available through the contact form on my website for talking shop. Gosh, I want to say literally anytime. I'll just get it. I'll ruminate and then reply with something. Otherwise, I'm gonna go have dinner. So I hope you all enjoy your evenings. And as the Romans say, be strong.